Going to the movies has always been one of the few things that makes me feel normal. That night, I was especially excited. My dad, a retired Marine with a chest full of medals and a heart full of sarcasm, had surprised me with tickets to the premiere of a film we'd both been looking forward to for months. He joked that it was a thank you for not sneaking any snacks this time present. I laughed, knowing full well I had a stash of peanut M.'s in my backpack anyway. Sitting in my wheelchair with my guide dog Axel by my side, I felt good, not out of place, not like a burden, just a guy going to see a movie with his dad and his dog. The theater was buzzing when we arrived. The lobby was filled with couples on dates, teenagers with greasy popcorn fingers, and parents trying to wrangle sugar-high kids. I could feel the vibrations from the floor as we rolled in, Axel guiding me calmly past the crowd. He always had this calming effect, not just on me, but on the people around us too. Strangers often smiled at him, sometimes even asking if they could pet him. Usually, I didn't mind as long as they asked first. But tonight, I just wanted to get to our seats, relax and enjoy the show. We had reserved accessible seating toward the center of the theater, not too far back, not too close. Perfect. As we waited in line for popcorn, my dad nudged me and joked about whether Axel was going to bark if the villain showed up on screen. I smiled, appreciating how easy things felt in that moment. It didn't last long. Looking back, I wish I had known that what started as a fun night out would turn into something completely different. While we were waiting in line for snacks, I noticed her before she said anything. She stood out in the worst way, loud and impatient, waving her phone in the air like it was a badge of importance. She kept turning around, complaining to whoever would listen that the wait was unacceptable, that she had better things to do, and that this theater clearly didn't know how to handle a crowd. My dad and I exchanged a glance, the kind where you don't need words to say, "Here we go." Axel sat calmly by my side, unbothered as always, even as she made a show of sighing and stomping her feet. She noticed Axel next. Her eyes locked onto him, then to me, and her lips twisted like she'd just smelled something sour. She stepped out of her place in line and marched over, high heels clicking against the tile. Without so much as a hello, she pointed at Axel and said, "You can't bring a dog in here. This is a food area. That's not sanitary." I stayed calm. I'd been through this before, though not usually so aggressively. I explained that Axel was a guide dog, trained and certified, and that under federal law, he was allowed to be anywhere the public was. She crossed her arms and scoffed like I had just told her the sky was green. "That's not a real service dog. People fake those all the time," she said, voice rising loud enough for others nearby to glance over. "It's not fair to the rest of us. What if someone's allergic?" My dad stepped in, reminding her that her opinions didn't override the law, but she wasn't having it. She mumbled something about entitled people playing victim as she stalked off toward another register. I thought that would be the end of it. She was rude, yeah, but not the first person I'd met with that kind of attitude. I tried to let it go and get back to enjoying my night. I figured she'd get her snacks, complain a bit more, and move on. But the look she gave me before walking away stuck with me. It wasn't over. Not for her. The theater lights were already dim when we made our way to our seats. People were settling in, the hum of chatter slowly giving way to the movie previews. Axel led me smoothly down the row to our designated accessible spot, then settled beside me like he always did, quiet and alert. My dad slid into the seat next to mine, balancing our popcorn and drinks while cracking jokes under his breath about the $10 soda. I was starting to relax again, trying to shake off the weird tension from earlier. That woman, the one from the lobby, hadn't followed us, or so I thought. I heard her before I saw her. Her voice floated through the darkness, sharp and annoyed, complaining to someone that her seat was too close to the dog. At first, I didn't connect it. The theater was packed. It could have been anyone. But then I felt it, that unmistakable feeling of someone staring. I turned slightly, and there she was again, standing in the aisle just a few feet from us, glaring down like we had personally ruined her evening. "Are you kidding me?" she hissed. "I paid for these tickets, and now I have to sit next to that thing." Axel didn't move. He stayed still, head up, eyes forward. My dad turned to her, calm but firm, and told her the same thing we'd already explained in the lobby, that Axel was a guide dog. that we had every right to be there, that her discomfort wasn't our responsibility. She didn't want to hear it. She kept going, louder now, drawing attention from the people around us. What if he barks during the movie? What if he bites someone? It's just not appropriate, she snapped. I come here to relax, not sit next to a mutt. Someone nearby told her to take her seat or leave. Another voice chimed in, saying she was making a scene. The usher appeared a moment later, a young woman who looked tired but composed. She asked if everything was okay, and I explained the situation. The usher nodded, told the woman that service animals were allowed, and offered to help her find another seat if she was uncomfortable. That should have been the end of it. Most people, faced with that kind of reasoning, would take the out, but not her. She muttered something under her breath and finally took her seat 2 rows behind us, still fuming. My dad leaned over and whispered that we should start a bingo card for how many times she'd call for a manager tonight. I smiled, trying to keep the mood light, but the pit in my stomach had returned. Something about the way she kept glancing our way, the venom in her voice, told me this wasn't finished, not even close. About halfway through the movie, I had almost managed to forget she was there. The film was intense, full of action and suspense, and I was genuinely drawn in. Axel rested quietly beside me, his head against my foot like usual. My dad leaned forward during one of the more dramatic scenes, whispering a theory about the plot twist. It was exactly the kind of night I'd been hoping for, but just as I reached for another handful of popcorn, I heard a loud scoff behind us, followed by the crinkle of someone aggressively tearing open a snack wrapper. I tried to ignore it, but then came the sharp voice again, unmistakable even in the dark. "Of course, the dog is still here," she said. "This is disgusting." People around her shushed her, but that only seemed to fuel her. The next thing I knew, something hit the side of my shoulder, a handful of popcorn. I turned slightly, stunned, not sure if I imagined it. Then came another burst, this time landing on Axel. I felt my heart rate spike. Axel stayed still, well trained, but I could feel the tension in his body now. My dad stood up, turning around to face her. "You need to stop," he said, loud enough to be heard but measured. "Now." She stood up in her row, pointing an accusing finger at me. "This is what I'm talking about. That dog shouldn't be here. It's bothering people. I'm allergic. My child is allergic." There was no child with her. That was obvious to everyone. The lie hung in the air like a bad smell. More people started speaking up now, telling her to sit down, to be quiet, to let us enjoy the movie. But she wasn't backing off. She took a step down the aisle, toward us, and I felt Axel shift slightly, alert now. "Get him out of here," she demanded. "I'll call the health department. This is a violation. I don't care if he's blind or whatever." Then she did something I never expected. She reached out and grabbed the handle of my wheelchair. She actually tried to move me. It wasn't hard or fast, more like a tug, but it was enough. The moment her hand touched the chair, my dad was between us. "You don't touch him," he said. His voice dropped low. That was his warning tone. I'd only heard it a few times in my life, and it always meant he was restraining himself. Karen threw her hands in the air like she was the victim. "You're threatening me now. This is assault. You people are unbelievable." I couldn't believe how quickly things had escalated. From popcorn to a physical grab to a full-blown confrontation. Axel stayed in position, eyes locked on her, calm but focused. He was waiting for a command, which I didn't give. I didn't have to. My dad had taken command of the moment. More ushers came in at that point, probably called in by the people around us. A few audience members had already started recording. Phones were out. The light from one screen briefly lit Karen's face, and for a second I saw something strange. Not just anger, but something wild, something unhinged. "Take that thing and get out," she yelled. "I paid for this movie and I won't be harassed by animals and freeloaders." That's when it stopped being just another unpleasant encounter. This was turning into something serious, something dangerous, and I could feel in my gut that the worst part hadn't even happened yet. The moment she grabbed the wheelchair, something in my dad changed. He moved with a speed I hadn't seen since his active duty days, planting himself between Karen and me before she could try anything else. His body was calm but coiled tight, like every muscle was waiting for her next move. I could tell he was holding back, but the way his jaw clenched and his voice dropped to a deep, steady tone made it clear he wouldn't let her lay another finger on me. "Back up," he said. "Now." Karen didn't take the hint. She took a step closer, waving her arms and screeching about how she was being attacked, that my dad was threatening her. People around us were watching with wide eyes, popcorn buckets in their laps forgotten. One woman behind us was filming everything, her phone held up high and steady, recording every word. My dad didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed on Karen. "You've assaulted my son. You threw food at him. You touched his chair," he said. "You need to sit down or leave." Karen's voice jumped in pitch. She accused my dad of being aggressive, said he was scaring her, that she had rights. Then, in a move none of us expected, she slapped him across the face. It wasn't a weak slap either. The sound echoed in the theater like someone had smacked a leather glove against a wall. My dad's head turned slightly with the impact, and for a second, I thought time had frozen. Everyone held their breath. He didn't hit her. He didn't even raise his hand. But as he turned back to face her, he took a step forward and bumped into her with enough force that she stumbled backward. Maybe it was her heels, or the step down in the aisle, or maybe she just lost her balance. Either way, she went down hard, hitting the floor with a thud that silenced the entire room. There was no cheer, no applause, just a heavy, stunned silence. Karen lay there, blinking up at the ceiling, dazed. Her arm flailed for her purse, and she started yelling about how she was calling the police, screaming that she had been assaulted. The ushers moved in quickly, one kneeling by her, the other asking my dad and me to remain where we were. Someone helped her sit up, and that's when she saw the cameras, realized people had recorded the whole thing. Her expression changed. It was a flicker of panic just for a moment before she launched back into her rant, louder than before. But now, no one was buying it. People around us were shaking their heads, some laughing in disbelief. She wasn't the victim here, and everyone knew it. Security arrived a few minutes later, two uniformed men who looked just as surprised as the rest of us by what they were walking into. One of them approached my dad immediately, asking him to step aside and explain what had happened. The other went to Karen, who was still on the floor, dabbing at her cheek with a tissue someone had handed her. She had already pulled out her phone and was mid-rant when they reached her. Her voice carried across the room, dramatic and loud, as she pointed in our direction and declared that we had attacked her without warning. The crowd wasn't having it. Before the security team could even respond, several people started speaking up at once. One guy in a baseball cap stood up and said he had the whole thing on video, from the moment she threw popcorn to when she slapped my dad. A woman near the back confirmed everything, saying she had watched Karen harass me and try to move my chair. Another added that she had heard Karen lie about having a child with her. It was like a floodgate had opened. People had had enough. My dad stayed calm. He spoke clearly, hands at his sides, answering every question without raising his voice. I could see the tension in his posture, but he never lost control. I was still sitting in my chair, Axel at my feet, his head pressed gently against my leg like he was reminding me to breathe. One of the ushers came back over and offered me water, her voice quiet and apologetic. I thanked her and took a sip, trying to settle the shaking in my hands. The police showed up not long after. Two officers entered through the side door, taking in the scene quickly. They spoke with the theater staff first, then with Karen, who immediately launched into another emotional performance. She said she'd been attacked for no reason, that we had threatened her, that she was just trying to protect herself. But the videos told a different story. Several audience members stepped forward to show their footage. The officers watched in silence, passing one phone to the other as they reviewed the evidence. After a few minutes, they approached me and asked for my version of events. I told them everything, from the moment we entered the theater to the popcorn, the shouting, and the slap. My voice shook at first, but I kept going. I wanted them to know that I had tried to ignore her, that my dad had only stepped in when she crossed the line, that we hadn't come looking for a fight. One officer nodded and asked my dad to confirm, which he did. He kept his answers short, sticking to the facts. Then they turned back to Karen, who had gone quiet now. One of the officers asked her to stand, and when she did, they informed her that she was being placed under arrest for assault and disorderly conduct. Her mouth fell open, and she tried to protest, but they had heard and seen enough. They cuffed her gently but firmly, guiding her out of the theater as she continued to shout that she was innocent, that she would sue, that we would all regret this. The audience stayed mostly silent as she was led out. A few people clapped quietly, but most just looked relieved. The officers came back to us afterward and apologized for the disruption. One of them even gave Axel a quick pat on the head and thanked him for staying so calm. My dad and I exchanged a look. It had been a long night, but it was finally over. By the time we got home that night, the video had already started to spread. Someone had uploaded it while we were still giving our statements, and within hours it was being shared across every social media platform. My phone buzzed constantly. At first, I thought it was just friends or family checking in, but then I saw the tags. Dozens of people I didn't know were messaging me, commenting, resharing clips from the theater, adding captions like "Justice for the Guide Dog" and "Karen gets what's coming." I didn't even know what to feel. It was surreal watching myself on screen, frozen mid-reaction while the chaos unfolded around me. People were analyzing every second of the footage, praising my dad for staying calm, praising me for not lashing out, and especially praising Axel for being the definition of unshakable. Someone even made a short montage of him through the whole situation, calling him the real MVP. That part actually made me laugh. News outlets picked it up next. One local station did a segment on service dog rights and featured us briefly. They didn't use our names, which I appreciated, but the message was clear. People were finally talking about how often folks with disabilities are challenged or harassed for simply existing in public. My inbox filled with messages from others who had been through similar experiences. Some were parents of kids with autism who used support animals. Others were blind or mobility impaired like me. They all said the same thing. Thank you for standing your ground. Thank you for not backing down. I didn't feel brave. Not really. I just wanted to watch a movie with my dad. Karen's identity got out eventually. I didn't share it, and neither did anyone we knew, but the internet has a way of finding things. Her employer released a statement a day later, saying they had reviewed the video and were no longer affiliated with her. Rumors swirled about lawsuits and job loss, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. People kept asking for interviews, but I turned most of them down. I didn't want my face to become a meme or a headline. I wasn't interested in being famous for surviving something I shouldn't have had to deal with in the first place. Still, it felt good to know the truth was out there. That no matter how much she screamed and flailed and played the victim, the world saw what really happened. The biggest surprise was the donations. Someone started a fundraiser for Axel's ongoing care, and it took off fast. I didn't need much, but I used part of it to treat Axel to a brand new custom harness and some fancy toys. He deserved it more than anyone. Every time I saw him napping peacefully, it reminded me that in the middle of chaos, he never once wavered. Neither did we. Looking back, I still replay moments from that night in my head. Not the confrontation itself, but the smaller things. The way Axel stayed perfectly still, even when popcorn hit his back. The steady way my dad stood between me and someone who clearly saw us as less than human. The quiet support from strangers who could have stayed silent but didn't. It's strange how the worst parts of people can bring out the best in others. That's something I'll never forget. Before that night, I had already gotten used to being stared at. People don't always mean harm, but curiosity about a guide dog or a wheelchair or a scar often turns into awkward silence or unwanted comments. I thought I was good at brushing those moments off, good at pretending they didn't bother me. But the truth is, each one adds weight. Each one makes you second guess whether it's worth going out, worth dealing with the attention, worth forcing your way into a world that often forgets you exist. That night reminded me that I don't have to carry that weight alone. I didn't speak up during most of what happened. I froze, not because I didn't want to fight back, but because I didn't know how to respond to someone so committed to being cruel. I've learned since then that silence doesn't equal weakness. My presence there, my refusal to leave, my trust in Axel, in my dad, in the truth that was its own kind of strength. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay right where you are when someone tries to push you out. There's also something powerful in being seen, not just noticed, but truly seen. The people who recorded that moment didn't do it for clicks. They did it to make sure the story didn't get twisted. They knew, like I did, that without evidence, people like her often walk away clean, while people like me are left trying to prove we belonged in the first place. I'm grateful they didn't look away. I don't want to be remembered for this. I'd rather be known for something I chose to do, not something I was forced to go through. But I do hope someone out there sees what happened and feels a little more confident going to the movies with their service dog, or their wheelchair, or their cane. I hope they know they have a right to exist without apology. As for me, I'll keep going to the movies. I'll keep bringing Axel. And if another Karen decides to test me, I won't be afraid. I won't let her take up that space in my mind. I'll roll in with my head high, Axel by my side, and a quiet promise to myself that I belong. No one gets to tell me otherwise. Also, I might upgrade my popcorn bucket to one with a lid, just in case.